Welcome back everyone to the channel. So today we have a very special video with a special guest. We have an M3 in an individual color, and then we have my M4. Today's video we're going to be comparing the M3 versus the M4 and why I chose the M4 over the M3. So before we begin today's video, I do want to showcase this color. It's called Twilight Purple and it looks fantastic. This is probably one of my favorite individual colors on the M3 and M4 other than the Aventurine Red on my M4. This color looks so good. So first detail of the M3 versus the M4 is that the front end is exactly the same for both cars. So BMW made these M3s and M4s share the same front end, and you can see they are the same exact front ends. The M3, this one in particular, does have some Unit 17 carbon fiber styling. So it has the carbon fiber intakes down here, carbon fiber splitter, and it does not have the active driving assistance. So looking at that compared to mine, like I said before in my other video, I don't have the carbon fiber exterior package so that you get that chicken wire stuff here, no lip, and with the active driving assistant, this part of the grille is different from the M3 when you have that option installed. I definitely want to get the splitter and carbon fiber intakes installed, so be on the lookout for those videos because it looks so much more aggressive. But for the front end and the hood, the M3 and M4 are pretty much identical. As you move along to the side, this is where the difference starts. Obviously the M3 has 4 doors, and then you go to the M4 and it's a 2-door coupe. So you don't have the 4 doors. You do have a lot longer front door to kind of compensate for not having a back door so passengers can get in. But the M3 has 4 whole doors and you can easily get into the back and to the rear for passengers a lot easier than the M4. As you move along towards the back of the cars, this is where the big difference starts. The M3 just has such a wider stance, wider hips. You can see the arches start over here. And this car is lowered, so keep that in mind. But the M3 is so much wider than the M4. So let's walk over the M4, take a look at the M3. And let's walk over to the M4, and you can see it doesn't really have that much hips to it. I mean, the rear is wide, you can kind of tell, but it doesn't have the flare arches of the M3. And I think that's the big thing that I love about the M3 is that the rear is so wide and it looks so good. It's got those wide hips. The rear is almost perfect, especially with this wing, this carbon wing. It looks so good. And in this Twilight Purple, my God, this color is amazing. But that's like the biggest difference between the M3 and M4 are the 4 doors, the wide hips, the wide arches, and the rear. So looking at the M4, the one thing you'll notice that is exactly the same in the rear is the diffuser. So this is the stock black optics diffuser. I don't think it's called black optics, but it is a gloss black diffuser. And then you come to the M3 and it's the same thing. So it's the same exhaust and the same diffuser. You can get the carbon exterior package, so you get a carbon diffuser. But with the M3 and M4, the only thing they share in the rear are the diffuser and the exhaust and kind of like the side parts. Other than that, the taillights are different. The trunk lid's different than the M4. And obviously the wider hips is also very different. So leave in the comments below what you guys think. Do you think the M3 rear is better than the M4? I would say the M3 rear is a lot more attractive than the M4 just because it looks so much wider and it just looks so aggressive compared to the M4. But I mean, the M4, it does look good. Stepping into the M3, you can see right away, so my friend who owns this car actually has the same exact interior as me. So it's Silverstone with the carbon fiber buckets. So it's identical. The only difference is the door. It's shorter, obviously, because the M4 is going to have a longer door to compensate for not having 4 doors. But as you step inside, the steering wheel is the same. The middle console is the same. The center display is the same. Every single thing is the same in this car and compared to the M4. So the interior wise, you feel no difference sitting inside the M3 versus the M4. The only difference is that you have rear doors, so you can fit more people in here a lot easier, and you get a full glimpse of the carbon buckets. And my gosh, these carbon buckets look fantastic. It's so cool being able to see the full back by just opening the door, because in the M4 you can't do that. So that's also a big difference, is that you can actually see the carbon buckets and actually like get to enjoy them, versus the M4 you don't really get to see them because you just have a small window partition to be able to look through the back to see the carbon buckets. That's pretty much the differences between the M3 and M4 in terms of looks, exterior and interior. The cars are very similar. The only thing, like I said before, is the rear is very different, and then also the doors, because this is a 2-door coupe versus a 4-door sedan. You do see some slight differences, but overall it's pretty much the same exact car. So now we're going to talk about why I chose the M4 versus the M3? Because like I said just now, the cars are very similar. So what would make you want to choose the M4 over the M3? To me, it was wanting to have a two-door coupe. So that's pretty much the biggest difference between the M4 and M3, is whether or not you want a two-door coupe or a four-door sedan. Obviously, with a four-door sedan like the M3, you're gonna be able to hold a lot more people. It's gonna be easier to put people in. If you have a family, easier to put a car seat, groceries, things like that. If it's just you and someone else, the two-door coupe is gonna work just fine if you don't have to have like a big family or things like that. Then you don't really need the sedan, and that's like why I chose the M4, was because one, I got an allocation for an M4. It was almost impossible to get an allocation for an M3, and plus I wanted a two-door coupe because I had the four-door with the CLA 45. I enjoyed it, but I wanted to try something like a two-door coupe because it's a little bit sportier, I think, than a sedan, but both cars are great in its own ways. Because these cars are brand new and I can't really push the M4 yet because it's still breaking in, and he's also breaking in his M3, we're not gonna go for a full-on drive in both of these cars, but do keep in mind, these cars pretty much drive exactly the same. Driving dynamics, sport mode, things like that are all identical between the both of the cars. So if you're looking for driving pleasure, driving, dynamics, you're not going to miss anything if you get the M3. You're not going to miss anything if you get the M4 because it's going to feel pretty much exactly the same. Same engine, same tune-up, same power, everything is the same. The only difference is if you get an X-Drive, which I don't think the M3 is an X-Drive. My M4 is not X-Drive. I'd have to double check with the M3 to see if it's X-Drive, but if this was X-Drive, it's going to drive completely different, but it's not because it's an M3, it's because it's an X-Drive. So the M4 and M3 pretty much drive exactly the same, and they feel the same. They put the power the same way. They're pretty much identical cars. Like I said, when it comes down choosing between the M3 versus the M4, it really comes down to preference, whether or not you want a two-door car or a four-door car. For me, it was a two-door car, so I went with the M4. If I wanted a sedan or I needed four doors, I would have gone with the M3 because like I said, and throughout this whole video, they're pretty much the same exact car. It really comes down to what preference you want. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. There's gonna be a lot more videos on the M4 and maybe on the M3 coming very soon. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys on the next video.